Welcome to the Black Crag. In today's mod spotlight, Drazo the Ashen and Rykar the Unbreakable lead a legion of Chaos Dwarfs against the forces of Grimgor Ironhide. The Chaos Dwarfs seek to enslave these Greenskins, yet Grimgor and the boys have something else in mind. Today's battle will take place using the Chaos Dwarfs by Sleepy mod, as well as the Black Crag custom map, both of which can be found in the description box below. Before we begin, I'd also like to thank Italian Spartacus, Black Iron, and the Gobbo King for partaking in this mod spotlight. Their YouTube channels can also be found in the description below. Let the subjugation begin. And now it is time for the 2v2 battle between the Chaos Dwarves and the Greenskins. So let's go ahead and take a look at the army compositions for both the Chaos Dwarves and the Greenskin players. And guys, we can go from there. So over here on the side of the battlefield, I will be leading this Chaos Dwarf force, who is going to be helmed by Drazo the Ashen. So he is essentially like a legendary caster lord for the Chaos Dwarves. And let's go ahead and look at some of the spells before we start. So firstly, he does have the Flames of Asgore. So this is, it looks like a vortex ability. It essentially summons this like giant flame storm, but unlike other vortexes, it actually doesn't move. So it does a ton of burst damage in one area, and it is very, very strong, especially on a map like the Black Crag, because you guys can see it's kind of like a ramshackle greenskin fortress, and it has several choke points. So there's a gate here, there's one here, and then there's also two on the far side near Italian Spartacus's army. So those type of abilities are going to be incredibly strong here. So he does have that. On top of that, he does also have the Ash Storm, which is a big AoE debuff. They're very expensive. They do cost 16 wins magic, and the one before I showed you did cost 18. You know, if you're really trying to be efficient, you probably want to bring them all, but I really wanted to try and showcase as many as I possibly could. So the Ash Storm, -8 melee attack, lowers accuracy, but more importantly, it does 20% weakness to fire damage, which is huge because most of the Chaos Dwarf units do fire damage. So you can see Drazo here. He has a melee attack of 70 and also does fire damage. This big Kadai Destroyer in the back also does fire damage, so I'm going to be getting some huge buffs from that. Even these Immortals back here, which are basically the elite of the elite for the Chaos Dwarves, they also do fire damage. So again, a very strong ability. I have the Breath of Hatred, which is 8 wins of magic. It gives melee attack. It makes units unbreakable, which is awesome. But more importantly, it buffs both a unit and your lord. So if you have like the Immortals and Drazo are like working on an enemy heroic unit, you can pop this and they just start beating them down horribly. So very cool. We have the Curse of Hashut, which is basically like the Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma with different scaling. And then lastly, I do have the Burning Wrath, which is a very cheap bombardment ability. It only costs 4 wins of magic, and it's on a 20-second cooldown. On top of that, he does have Dark Renown, so pretty similar to Thorgrim, but the radius is huge. I mean, look at that. 12 melee attack here. And guys, just for the record, Drazo is very expensive, much more expensive than the traditional Dwarf Lord. So again, that's kind of the justification for his really, really powerful abilities here. So, and then the Blessing of Hashut. So it's a constant thing that buffs himself unless he's broken. And on top of that, he is immune to Vigor, has some other neat abilities like charge defense versus large, fire resist, missile resist, all that kind of good stuff. So they don't have magic resist, so they can take a lot of damage from magic. So a good Photogork will definitely do them some good over there. So on top of that, I do have a bunch of troops, but before that, Italian Spartacus is going to be piloting this army here on the far side, and we are going to be facing off against the Gobbo King as well as Black Iron. So guys, if you haven't gone to Gobbo King and Black Iron's channel, they both are starting YouTube channels themselves, so definitely go check them out, subscribe, and have some fun. So aside from that, in the front line, I do have some standard Chaos Dwarf Warriors. Pretty similar scaling to traditional Dwarf Warriors. I do have some Infernal Ironsworn, so these guys are just linebackers. 120 armor, charge defense against all. They have 54 melee attack, 62 melee defense, so very similar to Ironbreakers. Again, just different stats in regards to magic damage, and you know they have fire resist, which will be, I don't know if there's any purpose against the Greenskins for that, but still they look really awesome. So one of the things about the Chaos Dwarves is they are kind of a slave culture. So again, the kind of the theme of this battle is that the Chaos Dwarves are coming to subjugate the Greenskins, so that definitely should be fun, and let's see if they succeed. So in the front, I do have these Infernal long shots, which are basically like thunders. They have very good range of 160 armor piercing damage and 23 missile damage with heavy armor piercing, like I mentioned before, and pretty good melee attack. Actually, their melee attack, when buffed, I guess by Drazo, is actually 40, and their melee defense is 38. So these guys are great in melee. Over here in the back, I do have some Black Orc slaves, so they're pretty good. 37 weapon strength. They're not as good as like regular Black Orcs, but still can put up a pretty good fight. They're going to be defending this Death Streaker rocket launcher, which is a chemical battery, which shoots poison volleys. Over here, I do have a force which is going to be pushing in against this far side here. It's going to be headed by a bunch of Goblin slaves, and just look at their weapons here. It's so great. They also do have some Infernal Guard hail shots. So these guys, shorter range, 100. They're basically like grenade launchers, so definitely a very cool unit. In the back, there's going to be some more Infernal Ironsworn. And guys, something that's probably my favorite aspect of the Chaos Dwarfs is they have these awesome monstrous units. So here you have this Bale Taurus. So looks like a Manticore, but again, it does cause fear and terror. But my favorite aspect of it is the fact that it does have this blazing body. So against like low tier units like goblins and cheap orc units, it does perpetual AoE damage. So somewhat like a Mortis Engine, I would say. Very neat stuff there. So the Kadai Destroyer, also very strong. It's basically just like this is like what the Doom Bull wants to be. It's just this juiced up thing. It costs like almost 3,000 gold. Fear, pure terror, 500 weapon strength. This thing does not mess around, and I think it is immune to vigor. And on top of that, it does have the Kadai unbinding. So let's see, what does it do? So summon units degrade over time. So I guess it, instead of like routing, it actually like degrades like a vampire counts unit. So that's pretty much my army. Italian Spartacus has most of the same troops. I'll just look at some of the ones I didn't showcase. These guys are the Kadai Fireborn, 96 armor piercing. They do magic damage as well. Definitely be good against Black Orcs. Not as efficient against unarmored troops, but still very strong nonetheless, and they do cause fear. In the back, he has some long shots who are going to be led by some Hobgoblin Cutthroats. So these guys, kind of like Nasty Skulkers, but Hobgoblins are kind of the unique thematic unit for the Chaos Dwarves. Over here, he does have some Slave Ogres, so just look at these things. They're so ridiculous looking. 63 armor-piercing weapon strength, which is huge. They only cost 400, but their leadership is so poor, and their defensive stats are pitiful, with 19 melee attack and 16 melee defense. But over here, this is his lord. He actually has the Lamasu himself, which is a different variant on the Bell Taurus, but this is his lord. Rykar the Unbreakable. He has an anti-large bonus, armor piercing, and he's unbreakable as his name would infer. So he's more of like a combat lord, very similar to like Grombrindle or Ungram. And, aside from that, not terribly unique, but still a very, very cool lord. In the back, he has a magma cannon and a bunch of slaves. So he has orc slaves, goblin, and ogre slaves just charging the front line. So he definitely has more of a slave-centric army. The last units I wanted to showcase are actually already over here in the forest, battling against some of these forest goblin spider riders. And again, my apologies for the long delay, just a lot to show you guys. So these are bull centaurs with spears. They do have an anti-large bonus. Definitely a very cool unit, and they are going to be led by this guy over here, the bull centaur. What does that say? The Taruk, which is kind of like the heroic version of those units. So guys, without further ado, let's get right down to the action and see if the Chaos Dwarves can enslave these Greenskins. So right at the front gates, I do have my Infernal Guard long shots, which are going to be pushing up. Definitely going to try and apply some pressure, but I knew something funny was up because I didn't see anything. I was like, are they not defending the gates? Are they just going to let us in? But they do have some Night Goblins defending here with some Trolls in the back, which are just going to be baiting. You can also see these Greenskins, these Biggins, and these other Night Goblins are going to be running down the ramp. And they also have a huge fortification up on the high ground with Black Orcs and just a ton of troops. So they're not investing too much in defending the initial gate, so we're going to get some decent volleys here, but I still couldn't see them. So I do send in my Bale Taurus, which is going to be great for scouting. So he flies in and he's going to discover these guys very quickly. You can also see my chemical battery trying to shoot in, but it does hit the rocks in the Black Crag. So my Bale Taurus is going to fly in, and I do discover these little trolls, so they're going to start getting teed off on by those Chaos Dwarf long shots, who are going to do some okay damage. Granted, they're shielded, they're fodder units. This is not how you want to be using these guys. So I do land the Bale Taurus, which is going to come in and get a great rear charge on these goblins, just start tearing them to shreds, and this is exactly how you want to be using this thing, because it will start draining them, very similar to a Mortis Engine with its flame attacks. You can also see the chemical battery shooting in there, applying poison, and they're just getting terrified and torn to shreds by this Bale Taurus. So you can see Black Iron and the Goblin King do send some Biggins, as well as a Goblin Big Boss to come in here and help intercept. So the Biggins, with their anti-large, should do pretty well here. On the far side, you can see my troops are advancing. I do have my grenade launchers, which are going to posture up, and my slave army is just getting ready to just kind of ramshackle into those gates there. Over here on the far side, Italian Spartacus is sending in his slaves first, his fodder, definitely a little bit more tactical than myself. So the Goblin slaves are going to charge into the front gates, and they're going to be met with some Goblins who are throwing the Fanatics, but it looks like they are thrown into the mountainside, which, unfortunately, they will meet their doom. So looks like a little kin-on-kin battle here, as these Goblin slaves are going to have a very epic showdown with their Night Goblin variants, but the Night Goblins are just so much better. You can see they're bigger, they're probably more well-fed, and these Goblin slaves are just going to get absolutely massacred by these guys. In the back, though, you can also see the Ogre slaves are coming in, and the Orc slaves. So these Chaos Dwarves are definitely going to sit back and let their slaves do a little bit of work before they get their hands dirty, but the Ogre slaves are so funny. They're such a ridiculous unit, but they're actually, what's their move speed on these guys? Oh, it's actually 54. So the Ogre slaves are going to charge in here, are going to start whomping on these guys, and you can see they get some great splash damage on these guys. And they are a monstrous unit despite their really pitiful stats, and they're going to get in there and hopefully do some damage against these Night Goblins. So the slave battle has begun here on the far side. Italian Spartacus, I believe, is also attacking the high ground here. So you can see he does have some more slave ogres as well as some more slaves just pushing in. So the Greenskins do retaliate with some trolls as well as some Night Goblins, which are going to do very well against these slave ogres. You can see are already down to 8 models. They are broken, so they're very poor leadership, definitely not serving them well. So back here on my side of the battle, you can see I have engaged at this gate. I do have my Goblin Slaves pushing in. I also do have my Infernal Ironsworn and my Hail Shots, which are unfortunately a little bit obstructed. They're going to try and shoot in here, but you can see the Greenskin Trolls just massacring those Goblin Slaves. Just blood, just guts flying everywhere in these hot gates. But thankfully, I do have my Ironsworn coming in, who are going to be very, very elite. Over here in the center, it's going much better. You can see my Balefire Taurus and these guys are pushing in. You can also see my Kadai Destroyers just massacring these Biggins. He just hits like a truck, and I believe he does also have the burning body effects. And you can see my other Chaos Dwarves are kind of fending off these troops and are going to be pushing in. So these Biggins are actually routing, so they're just running to the nearest possible exit, and they did get that Ash Storm. So they're weak to fire, which makes this Kadai Destroyer just so much more beastly. So a lot of the reinforcements here at this bottom gate have been destroyed for the most part. You can see this Bale Taurus, probably having racked up 61 kills already, has just done massive damage. But the Greenskins did kind of partition their troops. You can see they do have some missiles up here on the high ground, and their elite troops are waiting in the back. So they're kind of trying to wear us down just through pure attrition. We've taken about 400 casualties against their 700, but most of their casualties they have taken are just like goblin slaves and things like that. Over here you can see my Ironsworn and my Goblin Slaves have pushed in, so the Ironsworn are going to do well, because again, they do fire damage, and I know that, trolls traditionally are weak to fire, so they're going to get through eventually, but still the trolls have heavy AP, so against these Ironsworn, they're going to do decent. You can also see the hail shots shooting in there, those grenades, and I do have the Bull Centaurs who are going to be pushing into the main gate to assist these guys in just a moment, so let's kind of, whoa, that just like launched me up into the Shadow Realm there. So my Bull Centaurs are going to push through, going to help me get through here. They do have anti-large and very, very good splash damage, so they're essentially like a hard counter to trolls, as they do massive damage against like unarmored large units. So you can see all these goblins in the back are still pretty hyped despite the circumstances of fighting against these terrifying monstrous units. But in the front you can see we are pushing up the ramp. My Bale Taurus is just kind of harassing these goblins and trying to keep them back to the best of our abilities. You can also see a Vortex ability coming down, and my Kadai Destroyer has come to Italian Spartacus's side to help him out. So it's just doing massive damage. Granted, it's not designed to fight goblins. It still does rack up a lot of kills with its flame attacks, and you can also see Italian Spartacus does have his Lamasu, as well as these slave ogres and these slave orcs. These orc slaves, gotta get that name right, they're pushing through right here, and that Lamasu just with some big like magic vortex ability doing some pretty good damage to these guys, but unfortunately it does look like it wore off. So Italian Spartacus does have his long shots back here continuing to fire. You can see they're getting some pretty good volleys in here against the trolls, who are shattered and are definitely going to be fleeing the battlefield. In the back he does have his Kadai Fireborn, which are in pretty good shape, some Immortals and some Infernal Guards, so definitely keeping a lot of troops on auxiliary and just using his fodder units. And in the far side you can see Rykarth is done a pretty good job, but the Goblin Wolf Chariots are pushing out, but this is definitely not where they want to be. Rykarth kind of just chilling in the corner, but he's doing some pretty good work. But these chariots are not going to last long against these Bull Centaurs. And you can see a lot of the Greenskin troops on the bottom level have finally been broken, and it looks like the Chaos Dwarfs are going to be pushing into the keep. So over here we do have the high ground where their troops are coming down to secure the second level, and my forces have penetrated the front line, so I'm essentially just kind of reforming ranks. I'm pushing up. They do have Goblobbers and a ton of forces just kind of mounting here on the hill. You can also see that Grimgor Ironhide is over there up on the high ground, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he is. And the balance of power is still very even, so at this point the battle is just neck and neck. Like, there's no real clear winner. And I felt very confident pushing up, doing some pretty good damage there on the bottom, but most of the troops I killed were just like night goblins, and I actually took a surprising amount of casualties. But man, these guys are so cool looking, these Immortals. I've only racked up 7 kills, but you can see my Lamasu, or excuse me, my Balefire Taurus taking a ton of damage from these orc firing squads down here. But they did have a very mean firing battery up here. They had the Hammer of Gork and a bunch of troops, so I knew I needed to get those guys down because they were just like wreaking havoc. So before I engaged, I wanted to reform ranks, but you can see my Chaos Dwarves as well as these Ironsworn are going to push in here, and they're going to meet these trolls head on. So the trolls definitely going to do some pretty good work, but granted, these guys do fire damage and are very elite. But still, the trolls will get through with their armor-piercing damage. You can see some of these Ironsworn being sent flying. They're going to be backed up by some standard Chaos Dwarves who do have their shields up, and I believe they have silver shields. No, they're actually only bronze, so pretty similar to like regular Chaos Dwarves. And in the back, I do have some Immortals, which I essentially brought to deal with Black Orcs. They have heavy armor-piercing, 54, and have very good stats on top of that. So on the far side, you can see this firing squad is doing some great damage to my Bale Taurus, which is shaken, but if I can just get it over the lip and get on top of that Hammer of Gork, you can see he actually uses Gork of Fix It to slow it down, so very well played by the Greenskin players. And the balance of power, dead even. If anything, it might be like 2 or 3% in the Chaos favor. Over here on the far side, it looks like they're still holding this gate, so man, I was not able to break through these trolls and these Night Goblins, just being incredibly resilient. You can see my Bulls here are having a little bit of trouble getting through these trolls, even though they are on paper like a bit of a hard counter. So I believe I do use, yeah, they actually use Fist of Gork, which is going to make these trolls so strong. And you can see they're just kind of massacring my slaves and my dwarves here in the gate. So definitely a tough situation. And they did have some sort of a missile unit shooting at my Infernal Guard hail shots. Man, I keep getting jumped up there in the sky. But oh, it looks like this Goblin Rock Clobber over here was actually getting a clean line of sight, 110 kills. And it looks like this one over here does have 31 as well. Unfortunately for our opponents, the Kadai Destroyer is pushing back a ton of their slaves. And you guys know that Greenskins are pretty weak to like terror routing mechanics, so having like this big monstrous unit is definitely going to be very scary. So it's continuing to just fight on the ramp, doing a very good job, but it is taking a ton of damage from the Greenskin firing squad up on the hill. And they have a lot of troops on auxiliary, and guys, you can see Dad is finally coming to join the battle. It looks like Grimgor is coming to defend his Black Crag, and he's pushing down with his Black Orcs, and this is just such a cool scenic shot. You can see the Black Crag and all the Chaos Dwarfs trying to push up this tight choke, but the Greenskins still have a lot of fight left in them. Unfortunately, this Bale Taurus has gotten on the high ground, and it has killed this Night Goblin Shaman, which is a huge loss, because I believe they still did have a lot of Winds of Magic left. Down here, you can see Italian Spartacus' Lamasu doing some great work getting into these air boys, and his forces, his auxiliary forces that he was holding outside, have finally pushed through. So you can see these Greenskin trolls are being pushed back by the Chaos Dwarves, and it looks like these traitors, orc slaves, and these ogre slaves are pushing through. These guys are just so derpy looking. I love it. So they push through and they're going to get some good AoE attacks. You can see they send some of these goblins running, and man, these trolls are just performing so well. Granted, 0 kills, but I'm surprised at how long they've lasted. Like, they're still in this battle, but Italian Spartacus does have these pyre locks back here, which they're going to shoot. But in the back, it looks like some Night Goblins were deployed by the Gobbo King, and they're going to get a bit of a rear charge on Rykarth here. And I think these are the Unbreakable variant. No, they're the Poison variant, so they probably won't last terribly long. But they're coming in with a little bit of a rear charge mechanic, and are definitely going to get some good prison shanking back here on the Chaos Dwarf. So Rykarth and the boys are pushing forward. You can see the Greenskins putting up a pretty good hold. But their main bastion of support is going to be up here on the high ground. You can see all these Black Orcs are pushing down, and this is just a pitched battle down here. So you can see Grimgor Ironhide is fighting against these Kadai Fireborn, and some of the Immortals have engaged as well. So these Kadai Fireborn are pretty good against Black Orcs. They do have armor piercing, very good combat stats, and let's go ahead and take a look at see how many models they come with. So only 9, so still taking a ton of damage, because again, those like low model count units can get bursted down by units like Grimgor and Heroic units. You can see some of these Chaos Dwarves. This guy actually just gets massacred by this Black Orc. So the Orcs putting up a great fight, and they still have a ton of auxiliary. So they have nasty Skulkers just pushing down the hill, but thankfully we have finally pushed through the far side. You can see this Kadai Destroyer and these Bull Centaurs. This Bull Centaur Taruk over here doing some great job, and it looks like the Greenskins finally have collapsed at this far gate over here, so things are not looking good as this Bale Taurus is in this Kadai Destroyer is in very, very good health. So guys, the main battle has kind of come underway here in the middle. I have set up a bit of a firing line back here, so you can see my internal guard long shots are just kind of teeing off on these Night Goblins and are driving back a lot of these troops. And you can see Italian Spartacus does have some of these Hobgoblin Cutthroats pushing up the hill, and some of these Ogre Slaves, which are just so haggard. I'm surprised they're still fighting, even, you know, with that 16 melee defense. They're so incredibly squishy. But the Greenskins have sent most of their infantry down the valley right here, so they have a lot of resources fighting here, and they're definitely just beating the brakes off my Orc Slaves as well as some of my Immortals, only down to 23 models. They've racked up 42 kills, and my Ironsworn are also doing well, but I'm just being overrun by the sheer number of Greenskins. So they're not giving up this Black Crag easily, and they definitely do not want to be enslaved. So another Fist of Gork going down right here, which is just going to make them so much stronger than my troops. That heavy AP, and I did have to pull back Drazhoth, if I'm not mistaken, because Grimgor was on the hunt, and Grimgor is just a monster with Here We Go, with 128 melee attacks. So guys, Grimgor is in here in the front line, and he's actually just going to beat down some of these Black Orc Slaves, which we sent in against him, and just look at that splash damage. Also on the far side, they do have the Rusty Arrows as well as some Night Goblins, which are doing some great damage against my Kadai Destroyer. You can see its HP is just getting taken down. It looks like he went down about like 10 or 15% right there. So very, very well played. Granted, the balance of power is starting to favor us, as in the back line is heavily compromised. They have a Night Goblin Warboss back here, which is trying to support, but still, we have a bunch of Hobgoblins, and also this entire firing line they had over here was shut down by that Bale Taurus, who has probably racked up a ton of kills at this point. So the Taurus doing a pretty good job of just ravaging these low tier units at the back. So they definitely needed some like more Orc Biggins, or maybe, I don't know, maybe some anti-large Cav or something would have been pretty useful here. Granted, it still would have been tough because this guy does so good against like those type of units. So in the back, you can see these Orc Airboys just getting torn to pieces, but this pocket here is still putting up a great fight. But we just have so many troops coming from the far side. Italian Spartacus's reinforcements are finally reaching me. They're going to get over here and just collapse on the back of these troops. But you can see Grimgor's Black Orcs are just fighting to the death, just doing some outstanding work. You can see they have Stand Your Ground, they have the Wah, and they're just, he actually, I think he actually does have the Crimson Killers over here, so definitely doing some good splash damage. So let's go ahead and take an overarching look at everything, guys, and see how this battle's going. So as far as the troop count goes, we have 1,300 left to their 429, so the Greenskins are starting to look very thin. You can see this Night Goblin just shatter in the back line, and it looks like at this point it is indeed going to be army losses. So from here, there's just some sneaky gits hiding somewhere around here with their unbreakable stats. So very well played to everyone involved. It was a super fun battle. I really like this mod. And again, guys, the mod is the Chaos Dwarfs by Sleepy, and the map that we fought on is titled the Black Crag. So there will be a link to both of those in the description below, so definitely go check that out. Definitely one of the cooler custom maps I've played in quite some time. I really like these like multi-layered battles when you have like these different like pinnacles of where you can fight. You have an entrance here, you have one here, and in the back you actually have a bridge. So if you really want to be thematic, you can like leave some troops back here and like fight to the death on that bridge. And it looks like there is an entrance there on the far side. So very cool map. Well played to Italian Spartacus, Black Iron, and the Gobbo King. So they all have YouTube channels. Definitely go check them out, guys. They're putting up a lot of good content. But guys, thanks again for watching. Let's go ahead and take a quick breakdown of the unit stats and see what really performed. So, oh my goodness, 64 kills on those Goblin Slaves. That's insane. The Immortals did well, but the Infernal Ironsworn were just huge performers. And the Kadai Destroyer with 300 kills, the Bale Taurus with 182. So these guys were really good. And, you know, they came in, were able to clean up a lot of the Night Goblins for pretty much for free. But they did take some serious damage. I mean, my Kadai Destroyer got destroyed by that Goblin firing line. For Italian Spartacus, look at this. 49 kills on these Slave Ogres, and Rykarth himself got 33, but our monstrous units were really the name of the day. Those guys performed so incredibly well. For Black Iron, you can see his Black Orcs did really well. So his Grimgor like Goon Squad at the end was very tough. They actually beat back like my infantry line, and if Italian Spartacus hadn't had those reinforcements coming from the far side, that could have been a really rough situation. So I think a little bit more melee was needed. I don't know if it would have been a good idea to like try and hold those bottom gates too. That might have been a decent idea to like choke us in there and take advantage of those like terrain, but we had a lot of missiles as well, so it was kind of hard to hold those gates because we could just like shoot them in the gates. Gobbo King, he had a very goblin-centric army. The goblins did well. I mean, they performed decently across the board for how cheap they were. A lot of these night goblins did well, and his trolls were holding those gates just forever. So, and of course, his night goblins didn't rack up a ton of kills to archers because they were focusing the Kadai Destroyers and things like that. But again, well played everyone. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that Chaos Dwarf gameplay, and guys, more content coming soon.